Most people don't talk about what happens when your world is actually falling apart. Not just minor inconveniences or delayed texts, I mean full-on crisis, where your future is on the line and you feel completely alone. And this is the moment that no one warns you about. Because when you're standing in the middle of that storm, the last thing you want to hear is just believe in the end. It sounds tone-deaf, it sounds fake, and it almost feels like a slap in the face when everything around you is collapsing. But what if I told you that exact moment, when you're about to break, when nothing makes sense, is actually proof that it's working? Not in theory, not as some spiritual fluff, but in a real, practical way. What if that moment of chaos is the turning point that most people miss because they panic and give up too early? See, belief isn't about repeating words and pretending to be calm. It's about facing the darkest part of your story and choosing a new one right in the middle of it. That's the part no one tells you. It's easy to say live in the end when everything's fine. But when the walls are closing in, when the only thing that feels real is fear, that's when belief actually matters. Not as a nice idea, but as a lifeline. And what most people don't realize is that their manifestation isn't blocked because they're not scripting enough or visualizing clearly. It's blocked because when life gets hard, they go back to an old story they don't even know they're living in. A story that says, things don't work out for me. When things go bad, I lose. I always end up back where I started. And the worst part? That story feels so familiar, it almost feels like truth. But it's not, it's just a loop. The only way to break that loop is to interrupt it. You've got to shock your system out of it, not with force, but with decision. With belief that's so solid, it doesn't matter if everything outside tells you it's over. You've got to decide that the story you want is more real than the one you've lived before. And that decision changes everything. Not immediately, not always easily, but deeply. So if you're in that place right now, where nothing makes sense, where every path looks blocked, this story is for you. Because sometimes it takes a breakdown to break out of the old identity. And what you'll see, by the end of this, is that the law doesn't just work when things are calm. It works best when your back's against the wall, and belief is the only thing you've got left. That's when the real shift happens. That's when everything starts to change. There comes a point in life where things stop just being difficult and start feeling impossible. It's not just stress or confusion, it's that gut punch moment when everything you've been building toward suddenly feels like it's collapsing. That kind of moment doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't come with a warning. It just hits, fast and hard. And in those moments, the usual tools don't work. Affirmations feel fake. Visualization feels empty. Even journaling feels like a joke. Because when your world is falling apart, it's hard to believe that any of this manifestation stuff is real. That's where the real test begins. Not when everything's calm, but when the pressure is so intense you can barely think straight. Maybe it's a visa issue that threatens your entire life plan. Maybe it's a financial blow, or a legal problem, or something else that feels like it could ruin everything. And suddenly, all the ideas about trusting the process and living in the end feel far away, like things people say when they're not in survival mode. Because when you're in a real crisis, it doesn't just test your mindset, it tests your nervous system, your patience, and your entire sense of identity. It's during moments like these that the mind starts spinning stories, loud, panicky stories. Stories that feel like truth because they've been there for so long. Stories like, this always happens to me, or I knew things were too good to be true, or I don't get to win. And the worst part is that those thoughts don't come alone. They come with evidence, memories from the past that seem to prove the story right. Old failures, past rejections, situations where things didn't work out. It all rushes in like a tidal wave, and it becomes very easy, almost automatic, to surrender to that storm. But here's the thing, that storm, as terrifying as it feels, is a mirror. It's a reflection of the old beliefs trying to pull you back into the version of you who never wins. And in that moment, the real choice isn't about fixing the situation. It's not about solving the external problem right away. It's about choosing a new identity. One that says, this isn't the end, it's the middle. And I'm still going. When everything breaks down, that's when you get to rebuild, not the situation, but the self. The version of you that believes in the outcome, even when the evidence is missing. The version of you that can sit in the middle of fear and still say, no, I'm not going back to that old story. I'm not living that ending again. Because that's what a breakdown really is. It's an invitation to rise. And even though the ground feels shaky, the moment you choose belief over fear, the foundation begins to rebuild underneath you. What makes a situation feel impossible isn't always the situation itself. Sometimes it's the invisible story playing in the background, the one that's been running on repeat for years without ever being questioned. And it only shows up when something really matters. You don't notice it when you're manifesting small things or dealing with everyday stress. It hides. But the moment the stakes feel high, the moment your future feels threatened, that story gets loud. And it sounds something like this. When life gets serious, things fall apart. When I need support, no one's there. When things look bad, they always get worse. That's the script that starts playing. And what makes it dangerous is that it doesn't feel like a belief. It feels like a fact. Because it's happened before, maybe too many times. So when something hard shows up again, the mind doesn't even argue. It just assumes, here we go again. But here's the truth most people never stop to realize. Just because something has happened before doesn't mean it's supposed to happen again. What repeats isn't fate, it's programming. And the only reason that programming stays alive is because it never gets interrupted. It just plays out, over and over, like a movie you've watched too many times. That's why awareness is everything. The second you recognize that voice, the one that tells you everything's doomed, you're not stuck anymore. You're awake. And being awake doesn't fix everything instantly, but it gives you the power to choose. You get to decide whether you're going to feed that old belief or finally retire it. Because that belief has only stayed alive because you didn't know it was optional. The old story might say that failure is familiar, that struggle is guaranteed, and that relief is only temporary. But that's not truth. That's a pattern. And patterns break the moment you decide not to follow them anymore. It starts with one thought. One moment where you say, what if I'm not that version of me anymore? What if I don't have to live this ending again? And it doesn't mean pretending things are fine. It means standing in the middle of the storm and choosing to build a new belief system. One that says, people help me. Things work out for me. I get to stay. I get to be the exception. Even if you don't know how. Even if you don't feel it fully yet, you begin to think from that new version of you anyway. Because once the old story is seen, it can't run the show anymore. It might still whisper. It might still try to pull you back, but you'll know it for what it is, just a habit. And that's when the shift begins, not outside, inside. That's when the new story takes its place. There's a moment in the journey where logic just stops helping. It's not that logic is bad, it's that it has limits. Logic is based on what's already happened, what's already known, and what the world says is possible. But manifestation doesn't work that way. It isn't about repeating the past or following rules that other people set. It's about deciding, from the inside out, what's true, and sticking to it, even when nothing makes sense, especially when nothing makes sense. And that's when the choice becomes crystal clear. Keep trusting what logic says is realistic, or start trusting what belief says is possible. That choice doesn't feel pretty. It's not romantic or poetic in the moment. It actually feels reckless. It feels like gambling everything on a vision that no one else can see. But deep down, there's a quiet knowing that says, this is the only way forward. At first, belief feels fake. It feels like pretending. You try to convince yourself that it'll work out while the world keeps throwing more no's in your face. And every time something fails, the mind whispers, see, it's not working. You should have listened to reason. But the truth is, even those failures are part of it. Because belief isn't supposed to make everything perfect overnight. It's supposed to make you unshakable. And when you choose belief over logic, things begin to move. Maybe not in the way you expect, maybe not in the timing you want, but they do move. One small shift leads to another. One person responds kindly. One deadline suddenly extends. One random chance shows up that wasn't even on your radar. And even if some of those paths collapse, even if they turn into dead ends, they're still proof. Proof that energy is shifting. Proof that belief is making cracks in what once felt like concrete. But here's the key. You can't cling to any of those cracks like they're the only way out. That's where people fall back into fear. They get one glimmer of hope and decide, this has to be it. And when it's not, they fall apart. But the truth is, those no's were never failures. They were redirections. They were building the bridge, one invisible piece at a time, to the path that would work, the one that couldn't have been seen from the start. So belief isn't about picking one option and begging it to work. It's about showing up every day, holding the inner decision that says, I know this will end well, even if I don't know how. It's about saying no to the spiral, no to the panic, no to the old story that always ends in disappointment. And it's about saying yes, again and again, to a new story. One that doesn't need logic to back it up, just a heart willing to believe before the world catches up. The moment things start to look like they might work out, something strange can happen. Instead of feeling relieved, the pressure builds. That one opportunity, that one phone call, that one person who finally responds, it starts to feel like the only way out. And suddenly, without even noticing, the mind begins to obsess. The belief that felt strong and steady turns into desperation. Now it's not about trusting the process. It's about needing this one thing to happen. And that's where belief starts to lose its power. Detachment doesn't mean not caring. It doesn't mean giving up or acting cold. It means not gripping one specific path so tightly that everything else gets shut out. It means staying open. And that openness is what allows the universe to actually breathe. Because when the energy becomes desperate, everything constricts. Nothing can move. But when there's space to let things unfold, space to allow something even better to show up, the pressure lifts. And in that space, something real can finally happen. It's one of the hardest lessons to learn, especially when it feels like time is running out, like this one opportunity is the final chance. But even then, the power is in remembering that this one path isn't the miracle. The decision to believe is. Because belief creates options. It expands what's possible. But fear narrows it down to a single door and says, this has to be it, or I'm doomed. And when that fear takes over, it's easy to miss the signs. It's easy to overlook the moments that are guiding you, because everything becomes about controlling the outcome. But detachment says, if this doesn't work out, it doesn't mean nothing will. It means something better is still in motion. And that's not just positive thinking, it's how alignment works. When you stop chasing, you start receiving. That's exactly how the final solution starts to unfold. Not because everything was perfect, not because the world suddenly cooperated, but because the belief stayed solid while the hand stayed open. Because when the opportunity came, it wasn't clung to, it was welcomed, trusted, and used as the anchor to visualize the end, not as the last hope, but as a door that finally made sense. And that door opened not because of luck, but because the energy had already shifted weeks ago. So the lesson is this: detachment isn't about being passive. It's about being powerful without panic. It's about knowing your outcome is guaranteed, even if this specific moment doesn't deliver it. And that kind of knowing is what allows the world to move in ways you could never predict. The path might be longer, it might be harder, but it's real. And it only becomes visible when you stop trying to force it and start trusting that what's meant for you doesn't need to be chased, just accepted when it arrives. At the end of the day, what creates the shift isn't the plan or the perfect visualization, it's the decision. Not a casual wish, not a hopeful thought, a solid, grounded inner decision that says, this is happening for me. No matter what it looks like right now, I'm getting what I want. That decision doesn't come from logic, it comes from something deeper, from a part of you that's tired of the old story and finally ready to claim a new one. When that kind of decision is made, something begins to change. Not always outside, not right away, but inside. The nervous system starts to calm down. The fear starts to lose its grip. The mind might still scream sometimes, but the belief doesn't shake anymore. Because now there's something stronger guiding everything. A quiet, inner knowing that this is already done, even if no one else can see it yet. That's what matters most. Not the perfect affirmation, not the exact scene, not the dates or the how or the who. It's the state. It's the commitment to the end result before there's any proof. And it's the refusal to let the outside world tell the story. Because the moment that outside world starts showing signs, even small ones, it becomes easier to believe. And that's when most people lean in. But the real power? That comes from believing before the signs appear. From staying rooted when the doors are still closed. Because eventually those doors open. Maybe not the ones you expected, maybe not the easy ones, but they open. And sometimes it's the hardest path that becomes the right one. The one that requires real faith, real resilience, real self-trust. And when that moment comes, when things finally fall into place, it doesn't feel like luck. It feels like recognition. It feels like, of course this happened. I've been living from this outcome for weeks. That's the part people don't see. They only see the result, the email, the yes, the solution. But the real work happened long before that. In the silence, in the fear, in the choice to believe when nothing was showing up. That's where the story changed. That's where the energy shifted. That's where the end became inevitable. And the truth is, no one else needs to understand it. Not friends, not family, not even people who mean well. Because most of them are just mirrors for your own old fears. And when you stop sharing your doubts, when you stop asking people for advice that only reinforces your worries, you reclaim your power. You make your world quiet. And in that quiet, the new story finally has room to speak. So no, you don't need the details. You don't need to figure it all out. All you need is the decision. The world will take care of the rest. If you've ever been in a place where everything felt like it was falling apart, but you chose to believe anyway, share your story in the comments. Someone else might be going through that same storm right now, and your words could be the sign they need to keep going. You never know who you're inspiring just by speaking your truth.